got an angle I have to ask about now, which is, I heard you after that major, mate. I heard how lyrical, put it this way, the joke is, at that major, in a good way, you were also the stand-in for Maniac, because on this show, and in general, Maniac was actually known for being the number one Zywoo fan, right? He was the one who always thought Zywoo was the best player, and he's going to be better than Simple, or he is better than Simple. It was all that, right? After that major, you were giving Zywoo the highest. I think you even said he was the GOAT, didn't you? Didn't you actually have him, or you said he was going to be the GOAT and never play or something, right? So here's the obvious question. It's a hard one, but that's the fun of these shows. How do you evaluate Zywoo versus Donk now? Because in theory, if Zywoo's going to be the GOAT, or he is the GOAT pimp, he wins almost every tournament that Vitality's like in. He's the MVP of pretty much all these tournaments. It doesn't matter, even if he has the odd bad game, his numbers are unbelievable too. He has every single tick you could want. So how do you evaluate this at the moment? Donk versus Zywoo now, today. What do you do? How do you figure it out?
I mean, there's no doubt to me that Zywoo, according to me, is still the GOAT. You know, that doesn't change now. I think Donk will be in the future if he continues. I think that's always been my main argument. You know, whenever we had this whole, Zywoo versus Simple, I've always stated, I think I did that 2 years ago, that obviously Simple was the GOAT 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever. Right. It's just a question of time. It's not it's not Zywoo's fault that his parents didn't, enable him to play Counter-Strike earlier, or didn't, give him birth earlier. It's just a question of time. And I think time proved that to be the case. Zywoo, has been phenomenal. Has never been outside of the top three of the individual players ever. He is actually, going to be number one this year as well. I don't agree with that. I think Donk is the best player in the world right now, and probably has been for the entire year. But obviously, when you're Zywoo and you win all the stuff and you get all the MVPs, it's harder to make that case. I think the same argument I want to use for Donk. I think it's just a question of time. Donk has only been a pro player for, a year and a half? Let's have this conversation in 3 years, and I'm willing to bet my money right now that Donk would be the GOAT. I think if he continues what he's doing right now, then he's going to be in that conversation. The only thing that makes me resistant to have that right now is that there just hasn't been enough time. I think you need at least 2, and I probably also want to say 3 years, up on the top before you contest the likes of Zywoo and Simple. I think they've done it for so long and such a high level that regardless of Donk maybe having an average rating of 150 2 years in a row, I don't think even that would be enough to consider him the GOAT. I think we need at least a bit of longevity. I know that's, to many, maybe the weakest argument in all these conversations, but I think it's not an argument, it's more so an enabler. You don't enter the conversation before you had a little longevity, and then maybe you can use a long longevity as a counter argument to why you should place higher, why you should use that as an argument. But I think it's a qualifying factor to be in the conversation, and I don't think Donk has that yet.
What about then at the actual, I don't know, I'll tell you what, I'll do a little response to that then, I'll ask that question. Like, basically, I'm in a similar position, just the difference is I have Simple as my GOAT still. So, but I actually think this is why, if you're a Zywoo fan, and as I said, listen, Pimp said all the things you wanted to hear him say after the major, mate. He thinks Zywoo is the GOAT. Like, don't hate on Pimp for that. He actually does believe. But the problem, I think, if you're Zywoo is this. This is where, if you're a Zywoo fan, you all fucking jumped the gun and said some really stupid things 3 years ago, because they all did the same argument you did, Pimp. But what they forgot is this. In the same way as when Simple was number one, no one could ever imagine another player was going to come along. I mean, they came along the next year and contend him. At the time, he looked like levels better. Remember, that year was the year where it was like Simple, Device, Nico, and then I think, like, I don't know, like fucking Magisk or something. Like, mate, at that time, when you look at those players, you're like, bro, Simple could just be like clear number one for like 10 years straight. This is nuts. But then Zywoo came along, again, out of the blue. You can never predict these players. And he looked like, I mean, he did win it number one player a couple of years. He's won 3 times now. Some people do think he's better. The problem, if you're a Zywoo fan, is someone who before was a fan of Simple isn't agreeing with you now anyway, so you've got a dispute there, but you just think Zywoo's better. The problem you're really going to have is this. I actually think what you've just said is going to become, within the next year, that will be the new narrative, which is that what you're going to hate if you're a Zywoo fan is Zywoo either only got a short era of a few years or he didn't get any. People will go from Simple was the GOAT to Donk is the GOAT. And even if they went to Zywoo in between, they're going to go to Donk. Because I agree with you. I have to say what makes this conversation so difficult is, I used to say before that like Nico, Simple and Zywoo were like aliens because they don't even seem like normal human players. Like, they don't seem like their idea of a bad game even statistically doesn't make sense. It's like their bad game is an average game for another superstar player. Like I've always said, the difference between even like Nico and Simple is like a bad game for Simple is an all right game for Nico. Like we just don't expect as much from Nico. So one of the problems I have with this topic goes like this. I think Donk, in his own way, it's because of the role he plays, mate. That's what breaks my brain. Like, people might know, last year, I wanted Morrissey to be the number one player because I look at like how he played in the arena games. He also plays a game, I understand he plays a simple type game, an aggressive op style where he can win the clutches too. He had the whole game, but part of what would break my mind is I always told people, that's when I'm reasoning who I think number one is. Every time I would then watch Donk play, my brain was just telling me the whole time, this has to be the best player I've ever seen ever play, maybe any esports game ever. Like, what he's doing, it's not even that it's perfect, it's just inconceivable. Like, how does he do this angle? How does he get that shot again? What, now he's going to get 2 kills instead of 1? Like, he would just do these things round after round after round after round. So the problem I think we have on this topic is, I don't really know how people can, like, essentially, it's why I brought that thing about the setup. It's like, I don't really know what the knock against Donk is. Do you know what I mean? Like, the knock against Simple was he had a bad attitude. You have to have the right teammates around him. The knock against Zywoo, you said before, I agree with you, by the way. I think Zywoo without Apex, if Zywoo actually had the worst IGL I think that Zywoo could have would be someone who just says, like, yes, Zywoo, whatever you say, mate. I think that would ruin his game, mate. I think he'd be like 20% worse or something. I think you're right. I mean, it's literally something people are saying. Apex will literally turn to him and say, we're going to go out the tournament if you don't do something now, basically, which, by the way, is dope. And I can tell you, Zywoo is actually like a movie. He responded a bunch of times to that and fucking smurfed the tournament, being the MVP. The problem is, I don't know what the knock against Donk is. Like, I know it sounds fucked, because normally you should always be able to have a totally open conversation about who the best is. But I would genuinely say to someone who thinks Donk isn't the best player, tell me what he's doing wrong. Like, what more do you want him to do? Because I actually feel like, here's the problem, Pimp. It's the best way to explain it is this, right? Now that there is a Zywoo and a Monacy, actually, that does make what Simple did less special, because even though it's insane, Monacy's actually, first of all, looks quite similar, and Zywoo can get all the same stats. So actually, you know what? There are players. I don't think anyone can do what Donk does, Pimp. That's why the joke is maybe Keisuke is the only guy, because I can tell you right now, people like Nico, Nerds, fucking, what's his name, Exertion, Yakinda, these guys want to do what Donk is doing, Pimp. I can tell you, when I asked Exertion, he told me even he watches his demos and it's like, how do you fucking do that? Like, no one can do what this guy does from that role, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's true. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. He's in all his essence, he's very unique. You know, I think he is. Again, you know, my sports analogy will always go towards, you know, football, and I think he is the Messi of Counter-Strike in a sense that it's just a natural gift. You know, I don't think he's necessarily the hardest worker. I don't think he's necessarily the guy who's, you know, methodical about how he plays, how he warms up. You know, he's not obsessed like Ronaldo is in his way of preparing for games or training or working hard. I think Donk is just a natural gifted player at a level that we haven't seen before. He is indeed an alien, you know. And I also think, if you want to get into that argument, you know, one of the reasons why I have Zywoo as the GOAT, you know, and let me be honest, right? I think there's a case to be made for Simple. Obviously, it's a discussion.
Oh, but all these players can be in it, of course, yes.
Of course, yeah, but I wasn't even sure, you know, myself, you know, before I had a long thought about, you know, that I would say Zywoo above Simple. Okay. But one of the things that I also look towards is, who did you beat? You know, it's like, who were your opposition back then? And my argument would be that it doesn't really take away from Simple's numbers. Obviously, they would have been the same, but there's something to be said about coming in, being Zywoo, and beating Simple, you know, while Simple was still in his prime.
Yeah,
I think that's like one of the strongest arguments, where Simple, you know, his competition was Device. His competition was Nico with a rifle. His competition was players that was never going to be on his level, because, as you said, and I think that's so spot on, that a good game for Simple is an excellent game for Nico. You know, or an average game for Simple is a great game for Nico. And there was just a difference, even though they're both aliens. So for Zywoo to come in and beat Simple in his prime, that's stellar. And the issue I have now is that Donk is doing the same thing, and he's beating arguably not only Zywoo, but he's beating Monacy as well, and he's beating everyone, you know, to a point where it's when you watch the game and you watch the impact, and I know, I don't know if you saw the segment I had with Yanko as well, where like he laughed at me, where I said, like, it feels like Donk has way more impact than his rating suggests, and his rating was 1.5. That's what it feels like when you're watching it. It's ridiculous. You know, I know Mirage, the map against Mouse in the final, Chopper had 16 kills, Donk had 18 kills. My point is, the difference in impact was like this big, even though there was only 2 kills in between them. And people need to understand that Donk single-handedly won Spirit that game, where Chopper had an eco ace, you know, against a weak force buy or something. There was only 2 kills between them, but there was an insignificant amount of impact between them. And I think that's the case right now as well, where even if Zywoo is having the same numbers as Donk, even if, I don't know, Monacy gets back to a level where he's having the same numbers as Donk, you know, I would still argue the way Donk's play Counter-Strike, the way he dictates the game, is at a level I have not seen before. I think Monacy is the one getting closer to it, with the way that, as you described as well, aggressive opping, you know, taking a lot of freedom, a lot of liberty to go for opening duels. Whereas when Zywoo is carrying a game, it does feel like it's more methodical. It does feel like it's more rhythm, where he gets in a flow state and he's slowly but surely suffocating his opponents by getting kills here and there all the time. Whereas Donk, he's just a hammer that hits you. It can be a 9-9 game and then boom, game is over because Donk just had 2 good rounds in a row. I don't feel the same impact coming out from any other player in the world, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone else than Prime Simple do that.
No, that's actually one area I've always thought one of the biggest flaws we all have in Counter-Strike is we act like every single kill is of equal value, and so all we do is look at the number of kills. Like I'll give someone an analogy. Since football's your sport, by the way, I'll try and tailor most of my examples to that. Right? If people don't know, because of Pep Guardiola and the way they do the build-up play in modern football, the actual players that have all the passing records now are the defenders. It's like Van Dijk for Liverpool, mate, because all he does is take 1 million passes from the goalkeeper and the other defender and pass it to the other defender. Like, by the way, the point I'm making here is he does the easiest passes in the game, but it means his stats are bonkers for passes. But if I tell you to think of like a classic old school, like Zinedine Zidane, like collect the ball, like in fucking midair at midfield, go round 2 people, that's a different pass, mate. You know what? It might just record on the paper as he did one successful pass. The difference is that one creates a goal, fucking tears open the defense, creates all passing out. The other one just starts the playoff. I would say it's the same scenario. If we went and we did like a POV side by side of the Chopper POV and the Donk one, I imagine some of the kills Donk's getting are just like insane game-winning kills and crack up the whole. The Chopper's getting ones where, he shoots a guy in the side of the head or, he fucking kills the ecoing guy. Like, I get what you mean. That is totally fair. Here's the problem, though. I actually thought when you were saying that, though, of a way to reframe the Zywoo angle, which is if I was to talk to Zywoo on this topic, I would even say, if you actually want to be considered the best player, I think actually you shit out of luck, mate, because basically this guy's come along, and the joke is, I'd say this if Prime Simple was playing. I still think Donk might be the best player, mate, because what he's doing from the roles he's doing, it doesn't make sense. Like, he's sort of broken Counter-Strike, and as I say, it isn't that he's like, he hasn't noticed. I noticed I said he broke it. I didn't say he exposed something broken. Because if it was in the game, mate, I can tell you, I promise you, Exertion and Nerds, all these guys will be doing it tomorrow. They all tell me, like everyone else, I think I was good at it. They watch him and they're just like, nah, he's too good, mate. I don't even know how he does that. Like, I've tried those moves, it doesn't work. So the problem you have is this. If you ask the fan, I've often heard the question I've heard Zywoo fans ask me, like, what more could Zywoo do? I actually don't think there's an answer right now, mate. Essentially, you can't be who he is. I agree, so much it's also natural, mate. It's clearly not that he figured some cool angle out in a server. There's something genius coming from this guy. But I would say this, what you should think of if you're Zywoo is this. It's what I used to tell Device back in the day. I used to go, mate, at the end of the day, who actually gives a fuck if they say Simple's the best player? You win every tournament in Astralis, mate. If I were you, I'd just content yourself to just win. First of all, you tend to get the MVP if you win the tournament. I'd get all the MVPs, all the majors and all the trophies. And by the way, he did. At the end of CS2, the coolest thing if your Device is you can go, was I never #1 player? I think I'll just go to my trophy room that's like a fucking wing of my house that's got everything in it pretty much. Like, if you're Zywoo, don't worry, you can do that now. You're on your equivalent of Astralis. You're the best player on that team. And in fact, I'd even say, look, skill-wise, I think he's much better than Device. But I even think their games are quite similar because you know what? Device also isn't the guy like, hey, give me the ball. Like, he's the guy who's like, I'll play within the system. I'll play within what's happening in the game. If it's a quieter game, I don't mind having 15 kills if we win the game. If Zywoo does that, by the way, forget being he can win a lot of fucking tournaments in his career. He could win like the most trophies ever.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I know you probably hate to hear it, but it is and will always be a conversation that we like more than the players. They don't give a fuck. Like, Zywoo doesn't give a flying fuck. Because you're right. If you're winning everything, it is what it is. It's fun for us to have the conversation. It's fun to engage in it. It's fun for the fans as well to debate. It's the whole Messi Ronaldo over and over again.
Yes.
And it is entertaining. It is fun. But I'll even tell you this, and you may hate to hear that as well. Like this whole. Another example that is relevant right now is the whole vitality. Do they have an error or not? I hate this whole we have to set up. I guess not qualities, but we have to set up certain remarks or certain things you need to check off in a box before we can consider it an error. At the end of the day, I don't really care. I would love to have that conversation when their period is over. When we're in it, I just want to enjoy it. I just want to embrace what it is. See where it takes us, and then afterwards we can have the conversation. Was that an error or not? But having that in the middle of it happening, it kind of almost devalues what they're doing right now. And we had it a lot during the major. And it's not that I don't agree us having the segment, because it is something that's interesting. But I was like doing the segment, kind of fighting it in a sense where I'm like, I don't really care. I don't really care if Vitality has an error or not after they won this game, or after they win the grand final. You know, they're winning the grand final of the major and they're unbeatable. I don't care whether or not they lost that best of one. There's another thing, you know, it's like for people that ruin the whole narrative of them being unbeatable, I very much agree, and I very much will say that the only thing that counts is the best of 3 games, or that win streak, or tournament win streak, you know. And I don't give a fuck whether you lose a best of one in the middle of a tournament where you go on winning a major. And it's like we take these conversations regarding errors and who's the best player of all time, who's the GOAT, who's the best player in the world, and we put them to the extreme, because it is extreme to be having an error, or it is extreme to be the greatest player of all time. But that also devalues what's happening in the moment, because every single little thing we can use to devalue or counter-argue someone having an error or someone being the best player in the world, we are going to use it in the moment it's happening. And I hate that, you know. So I would much rather have that conversation in maybe 6 months from now, when Vitality, you know, have stopped winning everything, which could be the case after Cologne, who knows. But for now, there's still, you know, the greatest team maybe to ever play Counter-Strike. I think the only way we get the answer to that question is by waiting and see. And then when they're no longer in contention to be the best team in the world, then we can sit down and we can evaluate it, and we can do it properly, instead of having to grasp for stores all the time.
By the way, I do agree. Like, one thing I do think is actually impossible. You can try, you'll just never succeed, is trying to evaluate history at the time it's happening. Because I can tell you, an example would be when Team Liquid looked like they were going to have their era and win the major, right? Not only did they not win the major, mate, they didn't even win any tournaments after that. Like, that's what you can't conceive, because at the time when you're winning everything, your brain thinks things like, well, even if you don't win now, you're still going to win the odd tournament, or you're going to win every other. The crazy thing about CS is winning is so binary. You either do it or you don't, that when you stop winning, you sometimes never win. I mean, look at Australia, mate. They go years without winning a trophy. It's crazy to think of, but I agree. You'll never really know how great that team was until essentially it's over, until it's not the best team and they have to make a roster move or tear the roster in half. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.